Konnichiwa. Domo arigatou gozaimasu. My name is Pete Kuman. I'm a product manager on the Google App Engine team. And I'm going to talk to you today. I'm going to kind of give an overview of App Engine. This is basically what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to start just really briefly touching on some of the problems that web application developers face today when they build web applications. And after that, I'm going to talk just a little bit about what App Engine is. But Brett Slatkin, one of the software engineers on the Google App Engine team, is actually going to come up and give a demo. And he's going to build an application from scratch right here in a couple minutes. And then after that, I'm going to kind of go a little deeper into what some of the components are that make up App Engine. Talk a little bit about the preview release and where we're headed. And then hopefully, if we have time, take some questions. I know that we don't have a lot of time today, but we're going to try to use what we have. So some of the problems. This was discussed a bit during the keynote. If you're a web application developer today, it's very difficult to build web applications. And that's surprising because web applications have been, they've been built for years. And it's still today, we think, still way too hard to do this. And so I'll just talk about an example. If I'm a web developer, what do I need to do to build a web application today? Well, I need to set up hosting. I need to provision machines. I need to set up my software stack, and that includes sort of setting up a serving environment, configuring a SQL database, setting up logging and monitoring. And all of this takes a lot of time and a lot of money. And then once I'm done with this, I run into another problem, and that's when I start getting a lot of users, when my application starts getting popular. The machines and the hosting that I've set up is maybe too small to handle all of this load. And so all of a sudden, I need to figure out how to split my application across several different machines and build load balancing and split my database up across several different machines. And this is very difficult. And again, it's a lot of time spent focusing on something that isn't making your application cool and building your application, making it better for your users. And so at Google, we spent a lot of years building web applications. And we've developed several pieces of infrastructure internally for our own developers that make this experience an easier one. And Google App Engine bundles together several pieces of this infrastructure that we've developed and exposes it to the world so that web developers can use our infrastructure to build and host their web applications on Google's data centers. So hopefully we can solve the scaling and the startup problems for you, and you can focus on making your application really great. We had a couple design principles in mind when we started building App Engine, and really they can be boiled down to make it easier to start a web application and make it easier to scale a web application. We wanted to remove a lot of the overhead upfront costs that stood in the way of building a web application so that you could get up and running very quickly. And then once you were up and running, we wanted to make it a lot easier for your application to scale and grow from a small number of users to millions of users. That's really what we kept in mind. And so over the course of this talk, we're going to talk about really both of these points. And the first point, I could stand here and talk to you about it, but I think really the best way to demonstrate this is to have Brett, one of our software engineers, actually come up and build an application completely from scratch and deploy it to the web right in front of you.
Hey, so I'm Brett Slatkin. This setup. So I'm a software engineer on the App Engine team. Happy to be here. All right, it should be working. So what we're going to do today is we're going to build a. Simple application in just a few minutes, and I'm going to build something that's like a guest book. So I'm going to let people show each, kind of say, hey. Say something to their friends. I visited this web page. Here's my little message for you. And I'm just going to show you how easy it is to go from nothing, which I have here, to an actual application deployed on the web and working. So to start out, I'm just going to create a new project directory. I'm going to call my application shoutout.jp. So drag this into my text editor. So to get started, we're going to create a new application configuration file, and this is called app.yaml. This is what tells App Engine how to execute your application, where where your URLs should go, what code should be executed for what URLs, that kind of thing. So first I start out with my app name, shout out JP. This is version 1. The runtime is Python, which is the only language currently supported, but we're working on others. In this case, API version 1. Then I define some handlers. And in this case, I'm going to have all URLs just go to a single script called main. So that's a config file. So now let's actually create the main script. So I'll just start out with just kind of basic, just a hello world here. Oh, okay. So now go to this, open up the App Engine SDK, and grab my shout out app. Okay, and get it started. And then I can browse this, and I can see hello world. Okay, so we're started. Very simple, but it's working. All right, so to get you started, we give you a really simple web application framework called Web App. It's really simple. It's not as extensible as some others out there, but it'll get you started, and it's really functional in a lot of ways. So we'll import this. And so Web App lets you define a request handler. So in this case, I'm going to define my handler. And I'm just going to define one method to get started here, which is get. So this handles an HTTP GET request that comes in. And in this case, I'm just going to write it's the output. Hello from Web App. And then the rest of this is I need to kind of add in some, so I need to use Python's standard interface. It's called WSGI-Ref. And so WSGI-Ref stands for Web Server Gateway Interface Reference. It's a standard Python container for running web applications. And so here that's what I'm using. So I define a main function, and I create an app. And in here, I define how my URLs will map to these handlers. So in this case, I'm going to say everything goes to my main handler. Okay, and then I'll use WSGI-Ref to run it. And the last piece here is just some Python idiom which says that if this is the main module, then run main. Okay, so this is Web App. Go back to the SDK, go back to my browser and reload. There we go. So this is very iterative. That's the whole point here. You can very quickly write code and then test it, and then write code and then test it. You go from your code to your browser, back to your code, and so on. You can move really fast. You don't have to compile. This lets you just move very quickly. Okay, so let's start going with this. I want to actually kind of start building a real application. So with a real application, we also need templating. We need a way to make complex HTML pages. So to get you started with this, we also include a templating module which actually uses Django templates. So Django is a very popular Python web framework out there that a lot of people use. And Django actually works right out of the box with App Engine today. But with Web App, we let you use just the templating of Django, which is really powerful, but still simple. So I'm going to import the templating module. And then I can use template to render a template. So in this case, I'm going to create a new template called main. And OK, so this is it. I'm just going to render a template, a main.html file. Well, now I have to create that file. So I'll do that. So to start off, I'm just going to say create a new little hello world with h1, just a HTML tag. Go back to the browser and reload this. So here's the fun thing about iterative development. I've got a syntax error. It's just what happens when you're coding in front of a few hundred people. So you get nervous, right? So anyway, so I've got a little syntax error. It looks like I forgot the parenthesis on the end here. So I can notice that and reload. So now we got another one. What can I say? I'm not perfect. I actually had I had two of these things. So there we go. All right. There we go. OK. So iterative development. Yes, thank you. Yeah, okay. All right, so I'm going to make this more interesting. So I have the hello there. So now I'm actually make this application. So shout out Japan. That's what I'm going to do. Shout out to your friends. Tell your friends hello, something like that. So I'll create a new form here. The form is going to post. This is just standard HTML form. And I'm going to have two fields. So the first one is going to be a text field. And it's going to be who it's from. And then the second one is going to be another text field, which is the message that I'm trying to send. And then the button, I want to have the button say shout. So shout out. And then I'll kind of label these from and the message. OK. Again, iterative development. I can go back to the browser now. There we go. Just reloading the page. So you move really quickly. So this works. I've loaded the template, but I don't actually have any code to do something functional here. So let's write some functional code. So this is going to post to my handler. So I'm going to modify my handler to handle the post request. So I'll put it in post. And then in this case, I'm just going to show that I received something. So simple message, it'll say post received. I received the posts. So here I can say from Brett. There we go, post received. Now let's actually do something with data. So in App Engine, we provide a database module called the DB module. The DB module lets you define model classes. And model classes are the way, they're very synonymous with kind of SQL tables. But it's more like an object-oriented style of modeling and storing data. So here I'll define a new model class called the shout. And I'm going to have a couple of properties in here. So the first one will be who sent the shout. And then there'll be the message that was sent. In this case, I make it a text property because I might want a very large message. And then I have when, and like when the message was posted. And you'll see there's this thing called auto now add. It's kind of a funny name. Auto now add means when the shout is created to insert it into the data store. And so that's what we'll do here. So now I'll change my post handler to actually create this data and insert it into the data store. And I do this by just creating a new Python object called new shout. And I use the request parameters to create it. So I say, well, who is the who parameter? And then the message, I also get the message from the requests. Right. And then the last thing is I insert the shout into the data store. And then once this is done, I want to kind of redirect the user back to the main page so they can see that they've posted their new shout. So that looks about right. OK, so now I'll try posting again. OK, so it looks like nothing happened, right? It looks like I just kind of posted a little bit, and now it disappeared. Well, it's because we don't have a query yet. We're not actually querying for the information we're going to show. So we're putting data into the data store, but we're not trying to retrieve it. So let's create a query to actually pull the data out and to show it to the user. So to do this, we have something called a GQL query, a GQuery query. It's a syntax-like, it's a SQL-like or SQL-like language. It'll be very familiar to some of you guys if you've done anything with SQL in the past. And so what it lets us do is just kind of, we say shouts. So I create a new GQuery query. And then this kind of looks very much like SQL syntax. So I say select star from shout. And then I want to say fetch the first 100 of them. And then what I'll do is I'll create a context dictionary. This basically is what defines the variables that are available for my template for rendering. So you can have complicated templates, that kind of thing. And then I'll pass the context in here. This is what tells the template renderer, here are the variables you have to render. So then if I go to my template, I can start using this information. So I'm just going to do a for loop. And then I'll kind of like for each shout that I have, I'll create a new div, and I'll output the message, and then from the person. One thing I'm going to be careful about here is I'm going to be sure to escape this. I don't know how many of you have experienced cross-site scripting attacks from hackers or kind of malware, but this will prevent that from happening. So I'm going to make sure that I don't get attacked. OK, so that's the end of the template. So if I go to my browser and reload, there you go. I have a couple of shouts I've inputted a little bit earlier today, so you see a few of them there. I can post some new ones. You see them coming. So here's one from Pete. Great. So one of the things is that I don't really like the order here. I want the latest shouts to be at the top, and so I want to modify my query to reorder things. So I'll go back here, back to my code, and so where I'm selecting all the shouts, I'll also add an order here. So I'll order by when in descending order, and that'll tell me to show the latest ones first. So I just modify my query, go back, and you can see that the query is turned upside down. So now they're in the opposite direction. So I built an application. This has all been on my local machine the whole time. In fact, the plug has not even been in the whole time. Got to plug this in for the next part. All right. So let's see if we can get to Google. Sorry about this. Sometime, I'm sorry about this. Cable unplugged. Okay, there we go. Okay, a lot of debugging today. So, all right. So now I have this application I've been developing locally the whole time. You see, it wasn't even plugged in. Now I actually want to deploy to the web. So this is the App Engine SDK. I can click the deploy button, type in my username and password, and it'll actually go and connect to the server. So at this point, it's uploading my application files, it's updating my indexes, it's communicating with Google servers, and it's uploading my app. And it's already done. And so now I can go to shoutoutjp.appspot.com, and I can see this is live on the web. If you have laptops, go ahead, hop on, go on here, say hello. And so we can post, there's my post for me. So that's it. I went from nothing to having an app on the web, just a matter of minutes from scratch. And you should do it too. You can do it too. So yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Brett. OK, so Brett just ran through the process of building an application just completely from scratch and actually deployed it to the web in a matter of minutes. And I think it's really neat to see that. I also think it's neat to see what he didn't do. And he didn't have to bother with setting up complex configuration files or a complicated versioning system. It was all so simple to do. And so that really kind of emphasizes how we wanted to make App Engine make it easy to get started building web applications. So next, I'm going to talk about some of the components that make up App Engine. And the first one of these is our scalable serving architecture. So when you deploy your code to App Engine, we automatically deploy it to a number of different fault-tolerant servers. And as your application receives more traffic, we can automatically create new instances of that application in a matter of seconds. And so as your traffic increases or decreases, we dynamically allocate the appropriate amount of resources to the app so that scaling should be completely seamless, and you shouldn't have to worry about that as a developer. The next part, and maybe the most important part, is the distributed data store. So the distributed data store is actually a database that is designed to live on many thousands of disks across many machines. And so for that reason, it's different from SQL databases, which a lot of web developers are used to. One of the big differences is that we don't support joins. And the reason for that is because joins are very difficult to do efficiently in a distributed environment. We do support, however, composite indexes, queries, as you saw Brett use, and transactions. And so while there may be a couple things that are difficult to get used to, we think that once you play around with it for a little bit, you'll actually really come to enjoy the huge advantages it has. Because of the distributed design, the data store is able to scale to massive amounts of data very quickly. Just an example of a model class. This is actually the same class that Brett used in his application. It's a simple definition. The data store is inherently schemaless, which makes for very rapid development, as you saw Brett do. This is a model class of shout. Just like he pointed out, it has 3 properties. Each entity has 3 different properties. One is a message property, which actually contains the content of the message. And then a when property, which describes when the message was posted. And finally, who, which is a string property that contains the name of the poster. An example of a query, we expose, as Brett mentioned, a very similar language to SQL, and we call it GQL. Here I'm just selecting all of the shouts where the poster was named Brett, and I'm ordering them in descending order based on the timestamp when. The next component is the Python runtime. Oh, one more thing. The data store, I'll explain this kind of stupid drawing. The data store is based on an internal Google technology called BigTable. And we've actually published several papers on BigTable. It's a technology that we've used internally for a long time to host many of our massively scalable applications. And so if you're interested in learning more about BigTable, you can download our papers online and read through them. They're very interesting. So Python. As Brett mentioned, and as you saw, Google App Engine supports Python. It's the first language that we support. And we definitely understand that many developers maybe aren't used to using Python or maybe prefer to use other languages. And so we're working hard to enable other languages as well. And one of the things we'd like to hear from you is which languages you guys would like to see supported on Google App Engine. The runtime that we provide contains 100% of the Python language and around 95% of the standard libraries. We had to remove some of the libraries that depend on native code for security reasons, but most of the libraries that people use, including many of the web frameworks, are all in there, and you can use them. The next piece, and you also saw this in Brett's demo, is the software development kit. The SDK enables local development so that you can build your application entirely on your local machine and test it and iterate quickly, and then when you're ready, deploy it to Google servers. And finally, the web-based admin console. Once your application is live on the web, you want a window to see how it's performing and how it's doing, and that's what you use the web-based admin console for. The admin console provides you with a view of your traffic. It shows you, as you can see here, a list of the most popular URLs and the most error-prone URLs that will help with debugging when you're running live. You can also use the admin console to look through your logs and to look at your application's data and actually edit it live. One of the other really cool things is that we provide a versioning system. So if you accidentally deploy something with bugs, you can quickly roll back to an earlier version instantly online while your application is serving online. So some of the other APIs I'll mention briefly. We actually just announced 2 weeks ago a Memcache API, which is a caching layer that enables developers to render their pages more quickly and to build even more scalable applications. App Engine apps can send email, and they can also make arbitrary HTTP requests to other URLs. If you want, you can use Google accounts to authenticate your users. Definitely developers are welcome to build their own user management systems as well, but we provided this API to hopefully make things easier if that's not something you want to build yourself. And finally, the image manipulation API. This is something we've gotten a lot of requests for. It allows applications to do simple image transformations on the server side, transformations like scaling and thumbnailing and rotating, things like that. So I mentioned before that App Engine the current release of App Engine is sort of a preview edition. It's missing some things, and we know that, and we're working very hard to make it a complete product, but we really want your feedback as to what you'd like to see most with App Engine. So what does it mean to be sort of in a preview release? Well, right now, App Engine is completely free to use, and every application is restricted to a set of quotas. So each application can store up to 500 megabytes of data and gets enough CPU and bandwidth approximately for about 5 million page views per month, completely for free. And it's free to use during the preview release. And I also want to emphasize that Google App Engine will always be free to get started. So we're committed to supporting about 5 million page views per month completely for free because we think that the startup cost is another big barrier in preventing web developers from easily building and deploying web applications. So it'll always be free to develop your application on App Engine. In the future, we want to enable developers to also purchase more computing resources as they need it when they go beyond the free limits, as your application grows to that size. Some other things we're working on, more languages. As I mentioned, we support Python right now. We're really looking forward to supporting more languages beyond that, and also to hearing which ones that you're most interested in using. Purchasing initial capacity, I just mentioned that. We want to enable applications to grow massively large on App Engine, and part of that is allowing developers to purchase more bandwidth and CPU and storage as their applications grow and need them. Large uploading and downloading. So right now, App Engine can only serve files that are 1 megabyte or smaller in size. And we'd like to expand that because we realize that a lot of rich media applications need large files like images and, high-resolution images and movies and things like that. So we're building support for that. And finally, offline processing. As you saw Brett build his application, the entire computation model was the application receives a request, does some work, and then serves a response. So we call these request-driven apps. We'd like to expand this model so that apps can also perform larger batch processing requests and scheduled tasks and things like that. So we're working on that too.